At 46, I was driving strangers through the rain for $14 a ride, hoping they would not throw up in my back seat. 3 years earlier, I had been a doctor. Claire Bennett, owner of a thriving dental practice in a wealthy Connecticut suburb, married to a man who loved being seen with me. Then my father-in-law, Judge Walter Whitmore, decided I was unfit, and in 6 months he took my clinic, my house, and my license. Outside the courthouse, he told me I would never work again, smiling like he had signed my death sentence. He was right, until the night I picked up an elderly woman in pearls who looked at me through the mirror and asked if I was Diane Bennett's daughter. My mother had been dead for 34 years, or so I believed. Back then, my life looked perfect. I ran 5 chairs and 8 employees, and my husband Ethan bragged about me at dinner parties. I discovered his affair by accident through a text meant for someone else. When I confronted him, he did not deny it. He laughed and said people like us do not destroy families over feelings. When I filed for divorce, his father made one phone call and my whole world turned against me. Auditors appeared. False complaints followed. Patients vanished, staff quit, and a rigged hearing painted me as unstable and dishonest. The gavel fell, and I was no longer a doctor. I was the disgraced woman everyone whispered about. I left town with everything I owned in the trunk of an old car. I rented a room above a laundromat and drove for rideshare apps because no clinic, no office, and no company would touch my name. One rainy Tuesday night, I picked up a passenger from a mansion on the wealthy side of town. She studied me in the mirror and asked about my mother. My hands froze on the wheel. She introduced herself as Margaret Hale, co-founder of a major pharmaceutical company, and told me my mother had never died. My father had forged the certificate, changed our name, and disappeared with me because he could not stand being married to a woman more powerful than him. Margaret handed me a folder. Inside were photographs of my mother across 3 decades. Still working, still building, still searching for me through investigators and public records my father had carefully avoided. She had learned I became a dentist, watched from a distance, and decided not to disturb the life I had made. Before she passed of heart failure, she left behind a trust. Decades of quietly purchased shares in Whitmore Industries, and something she called her masterpiece, an evidence file spanning 20 years of bribery, falsified rulings, and offshore payments tied directly to Judge Whitmore. I drove to Boston the next morning and met the attorneys who had been waiting 3 years to find me. They handed me binders of proof, recordings, ledgers, and a letter in my mother's handwriting telling me not to let them break me the way they tried to break her. I spent weeks studying every page between shifts, then handed everything to federal investigators. By spring, the news was full of a judicial corruption case, and one morning I watched Judge Walter Whitmore led out of his home in handcuffs. At sentencing, I stood as a victim witness. I told the courtroom that he had taken my home, my career, and my name, but that long before he tried to destroy me, my mother had already built the weapon that would destroy him. I signed over the shares my mother left me, redirecting the company that once funded corruption into scholarships for women in medicine and law. He was sentenced to 18 years without parole. As guards led him away, he asked if I thought I had won. I told him no, my mother did. A year later, I reopened my practice under a new name, dedicated to my mother's memory, offering free care 1 day a week to families who could not afford it. I built a foundation in her honor for women told they were too ambitious to succeed. Late one night, driving the same streets I once drove in defeat, I picked up an exhausted dental student ready to quit. I told her that I had been a doctor, a failure, and a driver, and that what defines you is never what you lose, only what you choose to rebuild. When I got home, I whispered into the quiet car that we did it, because in the end, it was never revenge that saved me. It was my mother's patience, and the truth that outlived us both.